Luxury used to mean something untouchable, something rare, something you'd save for years to own just one piece of. But today you can buy a Gucci belt at the airport next to duty-free chocolate bars. And that shift tells you everything about how the world's most prestigious brands lost their soul in the race for billions. What happens when exclusivity becomes a marketing slogan instead of a reality? What's left of luxury when everyone can access it, when craftsmanship gets replaced by hype, and when brands care more about Instagram likes than the customers who built their legacy over generations? The luxury industry is facing its biggest identity crisis in history, caught between mass-market profits and the authenticity that made these names legendary in the first place, and the future looks nothing like the past. This isn't just about expensive handbags or watches anymore. This is about whether luxury as a concept can survive when the very thing that made it special, its rarity and meaning, has been deliberately destroyed by the corporations that own these heritage names. We're going to walk through exactly how the biggest luxury brands in the world abandoned their principles, chased fast money, diluted their prestige, and now face a generation of consumers who see right through the illusion, and more importantly, we'll explore what comes next. Because the future of luxury is being written right now, and it looks radically different from anything we've seen before. Let's start by understanding what luxury actually meant before it became an industry obsessed with quarterly earnings and shareholder returns. Luxury wasn't about logos plastered across products or celebrity endorsements or limited edition collaborations with streetwear brands. It was about scarcity, craftsmanship, heritage, and the kind of quality that lasted generations. Pieces you'd pass down to your children because they were made so well they'd outlive you. A Hermès Birkin bag took 18 hours of hand-stitching by a single craftsman who trained for years to perfect the technique, and the waiting list stretched for years because the company refused to mass-produce even when demand exploded. Rolex didn't need rappers in music videos to sell watches because their reputation for precision and durability spoke louder than any advertisement ever could. Chanel built an empire on Coco Chanel's revolutionary designs that freed women from corsets and gave them elegance with comfort. And for decades, the brand maintained mystique by controlling distribution and never discounting. Louis Vuitton trunks were virtually indestructible, designed for aristocrats traveling by steamship across oceans, and owning one signaled you were part of an elite class that valued quality over quantity. This was luxury's golden age, when brands didn't need to convince you they were special because their products proved it every single day you used them. When a luxury purchase was an investment in something meaningful rather than a social media flex. And when the people who bought these items understood and appreciated the artistry behind them. But everything changed when luxury conglomerates realized they could make exponentially more money by selling to the masses instead of the elite. And that's when the death spiral of authenticity began in earnest. LVMH, Kering, and Richemont started buying up independent heritage brands and immediately applied corporate growth strategies that prioritized expansion over exclusivity, profits over prestige, and quarterly results over long-term brand health. Bernard Arnault, the CEO of LVMH, and currently one of the richest people on earth, built his empire by transforming luxury from a niche market into a global industry worth over $300 billion annually. But that growth came at a devastating cost to what luxury actually meant. These conglomerates opened flagship stores in every major city and shopping mall, licensed brand names to eyewear and perfume companies, launched diffusion lines with lower price points to capture middle-class consumers, and flooded the market with products that carried prestigious names but lacked the craftsmanship and exclusivity that justified the prestige. The math was simple and seductive for these corporations. Why sell one handbag to a wealthy customer when you could sell 100 to aspirational buyers who'd stretch their budgets for a taste of luxury? Why maintain scarcity when abundance generated more revenue? The strategy worked financially as luxury brands posted record profits year after year throughout the 2000s and 2010s, but something fundamental broke in the process: the unspoken contract between luxury brands and their customers that said these products were special because not everyone could have them. Louis Vuitton became the poster child for luxury's identity crisis when the brand transformed from exclusive trunk maker to ubiquitous logo factory over just 2 decades of aggressive expansion. Walk through any major airport or shopping district today, and you'll see the brown monogram canvas everywhere, on handbags and wallets and luggage and shoes, to the point where owning Louis Vuitton no longer signals exclusivity, but rather the opposite. The brand opened hundreds of stores worldwide, trained salespeople to push products on anyone who walked through the door regardless of whether they appreciated the heritage, and created an entry-level product ecosystem designed specifically to capture young consumers buying their first luxury item. Louis Vuitton bags that once took weeks to acquire because of limited production now sit fully stocked on shelves, available for immediate purchase to anyone with a credit card and no waiting required. The brand collaborated with streetwear designers like Supreme to chase hypebeast culture and relevance with younger consumers, moves that generated massive publicity and sales, but further diluted the perception of exclusivity that once defined the house. You can find authentic Louis Vuitton products being resold at significant discounts on secondhand platforms, something that would have been unthinkable during the brand's golden era when pieces appreciated in value because of their rarity. The quality hasn't necessarily declined dramatically in terms of materials and construction, but the perception of quality has collapsed because when everyone owns something, it stops feeling special no matter how well it's made, and Louis Vuitton's omnipresence destroyed the very thing that justified its premium pricing. Gucci's transformation under various creative directors over the past 15 years perfectly illustrates how luxury brands prioritized trendy relevance over timeless elegance and paid the price in brand equity. After years of stagnation, Gucci hired Alessandro as creative director, and he immediately pivoted the brand toward maximalist designs loaded with logos, bold patterns, quirky embellishments, and a vintage-inspired aesthetic that dominated fashion media and became massively popular with millennials and influencers. Gucci's revenues exploded, growing from roughly $4 billion in the mid-2010s to over $10 billion at the peak of Alessandro's tenure, driven by viral products like logo belts, embroidered sneakers, and printed handbags that became status symbols on Instagram. The brand embraced digital marketing and influencer culture more aggressively than any heritage luxury house, sending free products to celebrities and social media personalities, creating shareable campaign imagery, and making Gucci synonymous with a certain type of conspicuous consumption that prioritized being seen wearing the brand over appreciating the craftsmanship. But this strategy had a shelf life because trends by definition are temporary, and what's fashionable today becomes dated tomorrow, leaving Gucci with a brand identity tied to a specific moment in time rather than timeless values. When Alessandro departed and trends shifted away from his maximalist aesthetic, Gucci's sales declined significantly, revealing the fundamental weakness of building luxury on hype rather than heritage. The brand now faces the challenge of reinventing itself yet again, trying to recapture relevance without further eroding whatever remaining prestige it still possesses, a balancing act that seems nearly impossible given how far it strayed from its roots as a leather goods atelier known for refined Italian craftsmanship. Burberry spent years trying to escape the damage done when the brand's signature check pattern became associated with counterfeiters and lower-income consumers in the United Kingdom, a cautionary tale about what happens when a luxury brand loses control of its image. During the early 2000s, Burberry's iconic tan, black, red, and white check pattern appeared on everything from trench coats to bikinis to dog accessories, and the brand licensed its name so liberally that quality control became impossible to maintain. The pattern became so ubiquitous that it started appearing in contexts that undermined Burberry's luxury positioning, featured in tabloid coverage in ways that made affluent consumers actively avoid the brand. Burberry had to undertake a comprehensive brand rehabilitation that took over a decade, pulling back the check pattern, limiting licensing agreements, closing discount outlets, destroying unsold inventory to prevent it from reaching off-price retailers, and repositioning itself as a contemporary luxury brand rather than a heritage label resting on past glory. The company hired high-profile creative directors, invested heavily in digital innovation and social media, and raised prices to create psychological distance from the mass-market associations that nearly destroyed the brand. Recent years have seen Burberry struggling again with declining sales and market relevance, cycling through creative directors and strategies while trying to figure out what the brand stands for in an era when heritage alone isn't enough, but chasing trends risks repeating past mistakes. Burberry's troubles demonstrate how difficult it is to rebuild luxury credibility once it's been lost, because consumer perceptions shift slowly, and competitors don't wait around while you figure out your identity, and the brand remains stuck in an uncomfortable middle position where it's too expensive for mass consumers, but not prestigious enough for true luxury buyers. Tiffany and Co. watched its iconic blue box lose meaning as the brand chased growth through lower-priced silver jewelry that made Tiffany accessible to almost anyone, transforming an engagement ring destination into a mall jewelry store. For generations, Tiffany represented the pinnacle of American luxury jewelry, the place where you bought an engagement ring or an important gift. And the robin's egg blue box itself became a cultural symbol of romance and celebration, immortalized in films like Breakfast at Tiffany's. But like other luxury brands, Tiffany saw opportunity in expanding its customer base downward, introducing sterling silver jewelry with entry price points under $200, heavily marketing these accessible pieces to young women buying jewelry for themselves and opening stores in shopping malls and tourist destinations around the world. The strategy worked financially for a while, generating billions in revenue from consumers who couldn't afford Tiffany's fine jewelry but wanted to own something from the brand. But it fundamentally changed how people perceived Tiffany as a purchase became commonplace rather than once-in-a-lifetime special. The brand's engagement ring business suffered as younger consumers increasingly viewed Tiffany as overpriced for the quality compared to online retailers, and the cachet that once justified premium pricing evaporated when every college student wore a Tiffany silver necklace. LVMH acquired Tiffany for over $16 billion during the pandemic, betting they could restore the brand's luxury positioning. But that requires convincing consumers that Tiffany deserves to be considered in the same category as Cartier and Bulgari, when recent decades of mass-market strategy trained people to see it differently. Tiffany's challenge reflects a broader problem across the luxury industry. Once you've taught consumers that your brand is accessible and attainable, it's incredibly difficult to make them believe it's exclusive and special again, because you've fundamentally altered the psychological relationship between the brand and the buyer. Prada spent years navigating the tension between maintaining its intellectual, understated aesthetic and generating the growth that modern luxury conglomerates demand, often compromising the former for the latter. Founded by Mario Prada and later transformed by Miuccia Prada into a fashion powerhouse, the brand built its reputation on sophisticated minimalism, high-quality materials, and designs that appealed to knowledgeable consumers who appreciated subtlety over obvious branding. Prada was the thinking person's luxury brand, worn by people who didn't need logos to signal their taste and status, and for years that positioning made it both profitable and prestigious among fashion insiders and affluent consumers. But the business realities of the modern luxury industry put pressure on Prada to deliver consistent growth, leading to expansion that tested the limits of exclusivity. Diffusion lines like Miu Miu that initially offered accessible Prada style at lower prices and increased production that made once rare items widely available. The brand launched controversial products like $1,000 keychains that seemed designed purely to create affordable entry points into Prada ownership, moves that felt cynical to longtime customers who valued the brand's intellectual integrity. Prada has struggled with relevance among younger consumers who gravitate toward brands with stronger social media presence and more obvious status signals, leaving it caught between its sophisticated heritage and the demands of contemporary luxury marketing. The brand's sales have been inconsistent compared to competitors like Gucci and Louis Vuitton, and Prada has cycled through strategies trying to recapture momentum without abandoning the understated aesthetic that defines its identity. Prada's situation highlights how even brands that tried to resist the mass-market temptation still face pressure to compromise their values in an industry that measures success primarily through growth and market share, rather than brand integrity and customer satisfaction. Chanel remains one of the few luxury brands that maintained relatively strong control over its image and distribution. But even this iconic house shows cracks in its authenticity as prices skyrocket, while quality concerns emerge. Under the Wertheimer family's private ownership, Chanel never sold out to a conglomerate and retained independence that allowed the brand to operate on longer time horizons than publicly traded competitors obsessed with quarterly earnings. Chanel famously doesn't sell online, maintains strict control over wholesale distribution, and positions itself as the most exclusive of accessible luxury brands with iconic products like the classic flat bag and the little black jacket. But in recent years, Chanel has raised prices so aggressively and frequently that even wealthy customers have started questioning whether the increases reflect genuine value or simple profit maximization. With the classic flat bag now costing over $10,000 compared to a few thousand just a decade ago. These price increases theoretically support exclusivity by pricing out aspirational consumers, but they've also generated backlash from loyal customers who feel the brand is exploiting its position rather than respecting the relationship. Quality concerns have surfaced among handbag enthusiasts who document issues like poor stitching, hardware problems, and construction shortcuts that shouldn't exist at these price points, suggesting that even Chanel isn't immune to the pressures to maximize profit margins. The brand continues to maintain its prestigious position better than most competitors, but the whispers of discontent among even devoted Chanel customers signal that no luxury brand is truly safe from the authenticity crisis when financial considerations override commitment to genuine quality and reasonable value. Hermès stands almost alone among luxury brands as a company that genuinely maintained its commitment to craftsmanship, scarcity, and quality over growth. And the financial results prove that real luxury still commands premium pricing when executed authentically. The Birkin and Kelly bags remain genuinely difficult to acquire despite enormous demand, not because of artificial scarcity tactics, but because the company refuses to compromise on production methods that limit how many bags artisans can create, and this commitment to supply constraint maintains both quality and desirability. Hermès artisans undergo years of training, and each craftsperson creates an entire bag from start to finish rather than working on an assembly line, ensuring both quality control and the preservation of traditional techniques that most competitors abandoned decades ago. The brand doesn't discount, doesn't sell through off-price retailers, doesn't heavily market on social media, doesn't chase viral collaborations, and doesn't pretend that everyone can or should own Hermès, positioning itself unapologetically at the absolute top of the luxury pyramid. This strategy has made Hermès one of the best-performing luxury brands financially, with the company's stock price and revenues growing steadily even as competitors struggle, proving that consumers will pay ultra-premium prices when they believe the product justifies the cost through genuine scarcity and quality. Hermès serves as a living counter-argument to the mass-market luxury strategies that other brands pursued, demonstrating that exclusivity and profitability aren't mutually exclusive when a company has the discipline to resist short-term growth temptations. The brand's success puts into sharp relief just how badly other luxury houses lost their way, because Hermès proves that maintaining authenticity and standards isn't just morally right or aesthetically preferable, but actually good business when executed with genuine commitment rather than as a marketing position. Rolex maintained remarkable brand strength, despite becoming more accessible than in previous decades. But even this watchmaking icon faces questions about whether its prestige is justified or simply the result of brilliant marketing and artificial scarcity. Rolex watches are undeniably well-made timepieces with excellent quality control and reliability. But watch enthusiasts debate whether the brand's dominance reflects superior craftsmanship or superior brand management that convinced consumers Rolex represents the pinnacle of watchmaking. The brand creates scarcity for popular models like the Daytona and certain Submariner variants, not because production capacity is limited, but because strategic undersupply maintains demand and allows authorized dealers to develop waiting lists that enhance perceptions of exclusivity. Rolex's marketing has been so effective that the crown logo became synonymous with success itself, making Rolex less about horology and more about status signaling, which fundamentally changes the nature of the product from mechanical instrument to social identifier. The brand's position in popular culture, reinforced through product placement and celebrity associations, means that Rolex ownership communicates wealth and achievement to a broad audience, regardless of whether the wearer or observer knows anything about watchmaking. Some critics argue that Rolex's market dominance and pricing have more to do with brand perception than with horological merit, noting that independent watchmakers and smaller brands often produce technically superior timepieces at similar or lower prices, but lack the cultural cachet that Rolex cultivated over decades. Rolex remains immensely desirable and successful, but its position illustrates how modern luxury increasingly depends on brand narrative and managed perception rather than purely on product superiority, raising questions about whether this represents sustainable authenticity or sophisticated illusion. Balenciaga exemplifies how luxury brands now embrace controversy and shock value as marketing strategies, sacrificing traditional elegance and good taste for viral attention and cultural relevance among younger consumers. Under creative director Demna, Balenciaga became famous for designs that deliberately challenged fashion norms, distressed sneakers made to look dirty and worn that sold for hundreds of dollars, oversized silhouettes that swallowed the wearer, and products like $1,000 versions of IKEA shopping bags that seemed to mock the very consumers buying them. The brand generated enormous attention and sales by creating conversation-starting pieces that people either loved or hated but couldn't ignore, making Balenciaga one of the hottest luxury brands among fashion-forward youth and celebrities. This strategy reached its peak with the Triple S sneaker, an intentionally ugly, chunky shoe that became a must-have status symbol and spawned countless imitators as luxury brands rushed to capture the dad shoe trend. But Balenciaga's approach came crashing down when the brand faced massive backlash over advertising campaigns that many viewed as inappropriate and offensive, leading to public apologies, internal investigations, and consumer boycotts that severely damaged brand perception. The controversy revealed the risks of building luxury on provocation rather than timeless values, because shock value has a limit and missteps can instantly transform cultural relevance into cultural cancellation. Balenciaga's sales declined significantly following the controversies, and the brand faces the challenge of rebuilding trust while maintaining the edgy positioning that drove its recent success. A nearly impossible balancing act that may prove attention-seeking luxury is ultimately unsustainable. Fendi shows how luxury brands struggle to maintain relevance when their most iconic products become dated and new offerings fail to capture consumers' imagination, leaving the brand stuck between past glory and uncertain future. The Fendi Baguette bag was the it bag of the late 90s and early 2000s. Immortalized by its appearance on Sex and the City and carried by virtually every celebrity and fashion editor, but that moment passed, and subsequent decades saw Fendi struggling to create equally compelling products. The brand tried various strategies under different creative directors: logo-heavy designs to compete with Gucci's monogram moment, architectural leather goods emphasizing craftsmanship, collaborations with artists and other brands to generate buzz, and aggressive social media marketing to reach younger consumers. Despite these efforts and some successful periods, Fendi never recaptured the cultural dominance it enjoyed during the Baguette era, and the brand remains somewhat adrift within the LVMH portfolio, profitable but not particularly exciting or directionally clear. Fendi's challenge reflects a broader problem for heritage luxury brands. When your moment passes and you've already sold to multiple generations of consumers, how do you convince new customers that you're relevant while respecting loyal customers who value the heritage? The brand's struggles suggest there may be limits to how many times a luxury house can reinvent itself before the constant reinvention becomes the problem, making the brand feel desperate rather than confident, reactive rather than visionary, and ultimately less desirable than competitors with clearer identities and creative visions. Dior walked a fine line between commercial accessibility and luxury prestige better than most brands, but even this house shows signs of overexposure and dilution as the LVMH machine pushes for ever greater growth and market penetration. Christian Dior's new look revolutionized fashion after World War II, and for decades the house represented French elegance and haute couture at its finest. But modern Dior increasingly emphasizes ready-to-wear, accessories, beauty products, and brand collaborations that generate high-volume sales. The brand's logo and signature patterns appear on products across every price point from $50 lipsticks to $50,000 couture gowns, and Dior boutiques now exist in virtually every major shopping destination worldwide, making the brand highly visible and accessible. Dior's advertising campaigns feature the biggest celebrities and invest enormous budgets in creating aspirational imagery that keeps the brand culturally relevant. But this visibility comes with the same risk that undermined Louis Vuitton. When everyone recognizes your brand and many people own your products, exclusivity becomes more perception than reality. The house continues to produce genuine haute couture and employs master artisans creating one-of-a-kind pieces for private clients, maintaining a connection to its roots that some competitors completely severed. But the vast majority of Dior's revenue comes from products that have nothing to do with haute couture and everything to do with accessible luxury. Dior's success demonstrates that a heritage brand can remain commercially viable while maintaining some prestige. But it also shows the compromises required to achieve that balance, and whether those compromises ultimately preserve or destroy what made the brand special depends entirely on your definition of luxury. So, what's the future of luxury after years of losing authenticity, and can these brands rebuild what they destroyed in pursuit of growth? Or is the concept of luxury fundamentally broken in a world of mass production and social media? The answer splits the luxury industry into two divergent paths: brands that genuinely recommit to exclusivity, craftsmanship, and scarcity, even if it means slower growth and smaller market size, and brands that fully embrace their position as aspirational mass-market products and stop pretending to be something they're not. The first path requires courage because it means turning away revenue, raising barriers to entry, limiting distribution, and accepting that fewer people will own your products. But brands like Hermes prove this approach works when executed with genuine commitment and discipline. The second path requires honesty about what the brand has become. And some companies are moving in this direction by leaning into accessibility and volume while maintaining premium positioning through design and quality rather than artificial scarcity. A third possibility emerges from independent designers and small-scale luxury brands that never scaled to mass-market levels and now position themselves as authentic alternatives to conglomerate-owned houses that lost their soul, appealing to consumers who value genuine craftsmanship and exclusivity over brand recognition. These independents often emphasize transparency about materials and production, build direct relationships with customers, and reject the traditional luxury business model entirely, creating a new paradigm that resonates with younger consumers skeptical of corporate luxury's empty promises. Technology also reshapes luxury's future through blockchain authentication, NFTs that create digital scarcity, made-to-order production models enabled by advanced manufacturing, and direct-to-consumer channels that eliminate the markups associated with traditional retail distribution. The luxury consumers of the future care less about logos and brand names than previous generations and more about authenticity, sustainability, craftsmanship, and products that reflect their values rather than simply signaling wealth, forcing luxury brands to either genuinely deliver on these attributes or face irrelevance as consumer preferences evolve beyond status signaling toward meaningful consumption. The fundamental question facing every luxury brand today is whether they have the courage to shrink in order to grow in prestige, or whether the financial pressures of quarterly earnings and growth expectations make it impossible for publicly traded companies and conglomerate-owned brands to choose long-term authenticity over short-term profits. Most luxury brands find themselves trapped by their own success, having trained millions of aspirational consumers to desire their products and built business models dependent on high-volume sales, making it financially devastating to suddenly pivot back toward exclusivity and limited production. The executives running these brands face intense pressure from investors and parent companies to deliver consistent revenue growth, and Wall Street punishes any strategy that prioritizes brand health over sales figures, creating a system that structurally prevents luxury brands from making the choices necessary to restore authenticity. This suggests that the future of authentic luxury may belong entirely to privately held companies like Hermès and Chanel that can make decisions based on century-long time horizons rather than quarterly earnings calls, and to independent designers who never compromise their vision for growth in the first place. The conglomerate-owned brands that represent the majority of the luxury industry will likely continue their current trajectory, becoming increasingly indistinguishable from premium mass-market brands, competing primarily on marketing and celebrity associations rather than genuine product differentiation. Some of these brands may attempt superficial moves toward authenticity through limited edition releases, capsule collections with independent designers, or marketing campaigns emphasizing heritage and craftsmanship, but without fundamental changes to business models and growth expectations, These gestures remain cosmetic rather than transformational. The luxury industry stands at a crossroads where the choices made in the next few years will determine whether luxury as a concept survives in any meaningful sense, or whether it completes its transformation into just another marketing category, distinguished from mass market only by higher prices and better advertising rather than genuine quality, scarcity, and craftsmanship. Ultimately, the future of luxury depends on whether enough consumers reject the illusion and demand authenticity, or whether the social and psychological needs that luxury products fulfill mean that perception matters more than reality, and brands can maintain prestige through marketing alone regardless of whether their products justify it. If consumers continue buying luxury products primarily for the status signaling and social recognition they provide, then brands have little incentive to invest in genuine quality and craftsmanship when cheaper production and better marketing deliver the same sales results. But if a critical mass of luxury consumers begins valuing substance over status, craftsmanship over clout, and genuine scarcity over artificial hype, then brands will be forced to either adapt or face declining relevance as spending shifts toward companies that authentically deliver what luxury once meant. Early signs suggest this shift may be happening, with resale market growth indicating consumers view luxury purchases more skeptically and need secondary market liquidity to justify the investment, with increasing interest in independent and niche luxury brands that position themselves as alternatives to corporate luxury, and with younger consumers showing more skepticism toward traditional luxury brands than their parents and grandparents. The luxury industry's crisis of authenticity isn't just a business problem for brands that lost their way. It's a cultural moment that forces us to examine what we value and why, what possessions mean in our lives, and whether the objects we buy genuinely enhance our existence or simply serve as expensive mechanisms for social comparison and status anxiety. The future of luxury will reveal a lot about who we are as a society and what we actually value beneath the marketing and the logos and the carefully constructed brand narratives that luxury companies have spent billions creating. The luxury brands that survive and thrive in this new landscape will be those that genuinely understand this shift and either recommit to authentic luxury or honestly reposition themselves as premium lifestyle brands without the pretense of exclusivity they can no longer deliver. The brands that fail will be those stuck in the middle, charging luxury prices while delivering mass-market products, making exclusivity claims while being available everywhere, and expecting consumer loyalty while showing no loyalty to the values that built their reputations. We're already seeing casualties of this crisis as some heritage brands struggle with declining sales, cycling through creative directors, and desperately trying strategies that worked for competitors without understanding why those strategies aligned with brand identity or not. The next decade will likely see consolidation as weak brands within luxury conglomerates get shuttered or sold. Successful independent brands get acquired by conglomerates seeking authentic alternatives to their compromised holdings, and new players emerge to fill the void left by heritage brands that destroyed their own prestige. This moment of crisis could actually be healthy for luxury in the long term if it forces a reckoning with the unsustainable practices of recent decades and creates space for new approaches that better serve both consumers and the concept of luxury itself, but only if brands and consumers make fundamentally different choices than the ones that created the current authenticity crisis. That's the current state and possible future of luxury brands after years of losing authenticity through mass market expansion, logo saturation, quality compromises, and growth strategies that prioritized short-term profits over long-term brand health. If you found this analysis valuable, drop a comment below sharing your thoughts on luxury brands, whether you think they can restore authenticity or whether that ship has sailed, and tell us which brands you think are doing it right and which ones lost their way completely. Share this video with anyone who's interested in luxury fashion, consumer culture, or business strategy, because these conversations matter, and understanding how brands manipulate perception helps us all make more informed decisions. The future of luxury isn't written yet, and consumer choices will ultimately determine whether authenticity matters or whether perception is all that ever mattered. So thanks for watching.